ऑल राइट, वेलकम एवरीवन। एक और वीक, एक और मार्केट रैप। मेरे साथ हैं पंकज पांडे सर, एंड हम लोग समझने की कोशिश करेंगे कि मार्केट में इस बार क्या हुआ सर। कॉन्सेक्यूटिवली सेकंड वीक, सेकंड गुड ग्रीन वीक, व्हाट हैपेंड देयर सर?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, Vishu. I think markets have closed at a lifetime high, so there is nothing to sort of complain. And this is in line with what US is also sort of experiencing because US markets are also at lifetime high. And this is happening after the Fed delivered first rate cut after 4 years. And although the expectation was somewhere of 25 bips, but 50 bips was a pleasant surprise. Now we've seen some bit of a profit taking happening in mid caps and small caps, but I think this week private banks outperformed big time, and they're quite crucial for Nifty because so this is one segment, BFSI is one segment which is typically one third of Nifty, and it's quite sensitive to the FI inflows. And since Fed has sort of cut rates, BFSI is one, especially private banks benefited the maximum, and which is why we are seeing Nifty at 25,800 kind of levels. Now, with this kind of a gain already there, overall sense is that probably next week also banks will sort of continue to do well because banking performance we are getting after quite some time. So Nifty could head towards say 26,200 and support should be kept at 25,200. And I think not only banks, our sense is that the PSUs and even the larger NBFCs also could benefit from this tailwind. And PSU banks have not really done much in terms of price performance, but they are quite favorably placed from a risk reward perspective. So banks continue to sort of look good. On top of it, metal and consumption pockets are looking relatively okay. And I think mid caps and small caps, one needs to be sort of selective. But yes, overall pleasant week, and I think overall our sense is that the momentum is expected to continue even next week as well.
Right. Sir, can we delve a little deeper into what are our expectations from here on after this rate cut from Fed?
So when you look at from the US Fed perspective, so we have already got a cut of 50 bips, another 50 bips kind of a rate cut is expected in the next two policy meetings, which is by the end of this calendar year. Now, next year, calendar year 2025, Fed is expected to cut by about 100 bips, and in 26 about 50 bips. And this is largely coming from the perspective that the inflation there has softened to about 2.6%, expected to sort of come down to 2.3%. Although core inflation is expected to inch up, but real positive rates in US is still quite high. So from that perspective, overall, the prospect of rate cut is sort of getting stronger. And I think good part is that the GDP, while the projections are slightly lower at 2% from an earlier prediction of 2.1%, but the US economy is strong enough to or the kind of year one would have because Fed is cutting at 50, about 50 bips. I think those have sort of done away with. One key takeaway for us is that when you look at the FI sensitive segments, the likes of IT and the likes of banking, those would be the big beneficiaries because now with Fed cutting rates after 4 years, the risk on sentiment is going to prevail. And FI inflows would come in pockets where they find value. Although in general, FIs have been sort of avoiding Indian markets because we all know that Indian markets are definitely not cheap. But I think IT probably could sort of witness some traction post US elections because that is one big event which is going to keep the market edgy. Because both the candidates are talking of diametrically opposite taxation policies. But with Fed cutting rates and anticipated cuts of another 200 bips over the next 18 odd months, or probably slightly more, I think the risk on sentiment is here to stay for some time.
Right, sir. Sir, we also have our half-yearly rebalancing coming up for Nifty. What can we expect to see?
So while it is known that you'll have players like say Trent and Bharat Electronics are coming into Nifty and they are going to replace companies like Divi's and LTI Mindtree. One takeaway is that you look at a company like Trent, that's quite expensive. So the aggregate P multiples of Nifty is definitely going to go up. The other is that since these will be moving to Nifty, so you will see changes in the Nifty next 50 as well. And you see some stocks like say SBI Card, SRF, Marico, or Colgate and Berger, they might get excluded from Nifty next 50. Whereas some stocks like BHEL, JSW Energy, and HPC, Union Bank, and Macrotech could sort of come in there. So whenever this happens, so this is going to happen next Friday. So just to sort of tell in advance that you'll see some traction in some of these names, because as and when the index changes happen, a lot of passive flows, which largely sort of mirrors a particular index. So those flows will sort of get recalibrated, and which is why some moves is definitely expected in some of the names which I have sort of mentioned.
Right. So you mentioned in the beginning, PSU banks are relatively better, have a better setup coming up. So could you explain, give us a little better on that? How is that so?
So we all know that the Fed has cut rates by 50 bips, and last 3 months, if you look at our 10-year yields have declined by 25 bips. And typically, the exposure of PSU banks on the GSEC is higher. And historically, whenever we have seen rate cuts, yield decline, PSU banks have been beneficiaries of treasury gain. But this time around, things are going to be slightly different because you are not going to see those gains in the P&L, but it will be reflected in the balance sheet in terms of accretion in book values. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that whenever the interest rate declines, obviously the net interest income also sort of declines. So I'll just give an example of, say, for example, Bank of Baroda. Now, Bank of Baroda, our sense is that they could be gaining about 627 odd crores because their duration is 3 year and 25 bips a decline in GSEC can yield that kind of a benefit. But since majority or good portion of their loans are benchmark linked, so obviously when you lower those rates, so interest income also sort of gets under pressure. So largely it is sort of negating both the things. But over a period of time, it does benefit banks, and because your credit growth largely remains intact, or it becomes better. But I think immediate gains are definitely going to be seen for NBFCs, because NBFCs will definitely benefit from lowering of interest rates. And again, the companies, what we are sort of liking there is Bajaj Finance, SBI Cards, and L&T Finance.
Right, right, sir. Sir, I think a big push is coming from the government towards the expressways and road sector in general. What are we looking at there?
The road is always the one big segment for the government. So you keep listening to Mr. Gadkari in terms of the new announcements. Now, up till now, if you look at the focus has been creating highways. We have created about 1,43,000 odd kilometers kind of a highway. Now the focus is shifting towards expressways. Now, going forward, if you look at the government is planning 50,000 kilometers of expressways, and of that, 4,000 kilometers of expressways is under functional operation. And construction work is going on about 6,000 odd kilometers. Overall, this 50,000 kilometers is expected to be completed by 2037. Now, the basic perspective of creating this expresses is to lower the logistic cost. So basically, what you want is a freight truck should run at more than 90 kilometers per hour compared to speed what they achieve of say 25 to 40, which is what globally, if you look at some of the developed world sort of achieves. Now, overall, up till now, in August month, the government has cleared somewhere about 936 kilometers kind of highways of about 50,600 odd crores. And the expectation is that in the second half, about 2 lakh crore kind of expressways could get approval. Now, this is a big tailwind for some of these road players like HEG Infra. So HEG Infra, we have already sort of recommended earlier. KNR Constructions and PNC Infra in our coverage universe. So we expect the momentum for these order inflows to come in, and that should translate into strong revenue growth for these companies in FY26.
Right, right, sir. Sir, I think another sector that was in news this week was IT because it saw a lot of red this week. So what's happening in IT, sir?
IT, if you look at since June, we've seen a good price appreciation of about 25-30% in most of the IT stocks. And when the US Fed has sort of cut rates, we haven't seen that kind of enthusiasm or the momentum being sustained. I think there are two, three things. One, with the dollar sort of declining, the overall prospect of rupee appreciation is sort of a big negative, is a sort of a short negative or minor negative for IT stocks. And the other challenge is that when you say interest rate sort of decline, the prospect is that the overall discretionary spending is going to sort of go up. And largely, while that is going to sort of play out in the medium term, say probably in FY26, in the near term, nothing changes much, and which is why you're seeing muted kind of a response. And on top of it, you have a US election because in US election, like I said, Kamala Harris is talking of taking the corporate tax rate from say 21% to 28%, whereas Mr. Trump is expecting it to sort of bring it down to 15% from 21%. So that's a sort of a quite divergent policies what we're looking at, and which is why probably IT stocks can remain edgy till the US elections are over. But having said that, I think discretionary spend is broadly expected to sort of pick up. And what we are sort of liking is some of the names like say Sonata, First Source, Birlasoft in the mid cap space, and Tech Mahindra in the large cap space. But I think the broader improvement is expected for IT stocks in FY26 only.
Right. Awesome, sir. Sir, I think another big news was for telecom sector, and Supreme Court has rejected their plea on AGR recalculation. So could you enlighten us about what was the case history and then what will happen from here on about it?
So I think all doors are closed for telecom companies seeking reprieve because the Supreme Court has rejected the curative plea filed by telecom companies because and this was pertaining to the order which they had come up in 2019. Uh, and so from that perspective, what the companies was highlighting was that Vodafone Idea had dues of about 58,300 crores, whereas that is calculated by DOT, and whereas the company's calculation was 21,500, and of that they had paid somewhere about 8,000 odd crores. So they were expecting a relief of 35,000 odd crores because this was the penalty and the interest on the penalty which was being charged. With all the sort of gates closed, I think probably one option for Vodafone is to seek a moratorium from the government because they will not be able to meet because what they need to typically pay is 40,000 odd crores from next 18 months onwards. So that's going to be a massive for them. So there are two, three options. One, I think our sense is that further rate hikes are expected, and that should sort of help the companies. But some bit of a moratorium is required from the government. And I think government has been very categorically in favor of having three players in the telecom side. So I think if not relief from a Supreme Court, probably some relief from the government is the way forward. But till that time, I think the stock has taken a good amount of beating and should not be touched till the time we see some kind of a relief coming in. But in the same breath, I think it is definitely positive for companies like say Jio or for Bharti Airtel because their balance sheets are quite intact. They have the capability to sort of bear this burden. So from that perspective, both the stocks or both the companies are relatively far more better placed.
Right, sir. Sir, I think Coal India is also making a lot of waves and is entering into greener energy methods. So, what all is happening there, and what can we expect from Coal India here on?
So I think green energy is the future, and I think all the PSUs are sort of heading into that direction. And Coal India, being the largest producer of coal, and coal we all know is one of the big emitters. So obviously, government is targeting a coal gasification of about 100 million tons. Because what happens that when you sort of do that, you can produce a lot of feedstock for various sectors like say chemicals or industrial processes, for example, methanol and ammonia. And overall sense is that Coal India has formed JV with BHEL. They have also formed a JV with GAIL. So they are looking to sort of produce synthetic gas or produce products like ammonia eventually, which will find its way into gas, fertilizer sector or petrochemical sectors. So overall, our sense is that a lot of these PSUs are diversifying for good, and Coal India already is sort of doing very well from the perspective that they're eyeing a coal production of 100,000 million tons. So from that perspective, the longevity of the business increases with this kind of a move. And it also shows the commitment of the government in terms of lowering the emissions.
Right, sir. While talking about green energy and PSUs, of course, the NTPC Green Energy IPO is coming up. So, how do we see this IPO?
So I think this is one of the largest thermal power companies in India, caters to about 24% of the overall demand, and has got a big capacity of nearly 76,000 megawatts. Now, so they are looking to sort of tilt more towards green energy side, and which is why this IPO is coming with an overall fundraising of 10,000 crores. So we don't know still the value ascribed to the overall green portfolio. So whenever that DRHP gets filed, we'll sort of know. But I think overall, if you look at this company is looking to have 45% of the share of green energy in their overall portfolio. And on top of it, they're also looking to sort of build nuclear power plants. So they're looking at building 2,800 megawatts of the nuclear power plant. And unlike solar or wind, nuclear power plants can operate at 100% capacity for a good period of time. That is the beauty of nuclear power plants. And so from that perspective, this is one company which is looking to build nearly 60,000 gigawatt kind of a renewable energy. Capex requirement is going to be massive in the range of 5 to 7 lakh crores. And they have about 3.5 gigawatt kind of a capacity and 28 gigawatt kind of a capacity in progress. I think this is one of the few large caps which we are quite comfortable recommending even at current levels, though it has made a new high. But I think power is one sector which is going to remain in vogue for the next 10 years. And I think NTPC should not be missed from that perspective.
Absolutely, sir. And so finally, talking about this week's hidden gem, what will it be?
So Vishu, two-wheelers are doing very well. Four-wheelers have sort of taken a backseat, but premiumization trend in four-wheelers is still sort of continuing. So I'm recommending Gabriel India with a target price of 600. This is the top 10 global shock absorber manufacturers catering to two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheelers, and they get 61% of their sales from two-wheelers and three-wheelers, which is a segment which is doing very well. And they have about 25% of their sales coming from the PV side. So we all know two-wheeler is doing well. The rural comment is better, so that segment of the market is definitely doing well. Good part is that on the EV side also they have got a 70% market share. So even if the shift happens on the EV side in two-wheelers, they stand to benefit from it. And on the PV side, while they have got a share of some 23% in the PV side, but largely it is on the SUV domain, which is what is sort of doing better in the market. And sunroofs are also in vogue. It's becoming a standard product. So they've got a JV within Alpha, which is for manufacturing sunroof system. So a combination of this makes us feel that this company can deliver a 24% kind of a CAGR kind of a growth, while the top line growth we've taken at a very moderate at 9%. And balance sheet is good, and with a target price of 600, valuing it at about 30 multiples.
Great, sir. Thank you so much for that. Well, this was it. This was our weekly wrap. If you have any questions for Pankaj, sir, please do put them down in the comments, and we'll be back next week with the answers. Thank you so much for your time again, Pankaj, sir.
Thank you.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risk. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.